Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama. Tonight we have a special guest. We're going to be talking about Noah's Ark. This guy lives there, where Noah's Ark landed. So we're going to have Andrew Jones come on in just a second here. For those that don't know about our ministry, I'm Kent Hovind, Baptist preacher, 50 years now. We believe the Bible is true and evolution is the dumbest idea in the history of the world. If you believe you came from a rock, you need serious psychological help. We're here to help. Okay? Call 855 Big Dino, extension 3. I'll be glad to talk you out of your dumb religion of evolution. Or if you don't believe the Bible is true, you don't believe the flood story, pay attention tonight. Okay, Joseph, bring in Andrew Jones over in the country of Turkey. Now, Andrew, thank you for joining us, brother.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, this map I'm showing of Turkey with the arrow pointing to the far right side, is that about correct where you are?
Yes, we're that little corner in the northeast, right near the Iranian border, and Armenia is right to the north of us.
Okay. My best friend in college was from Armenia, uh, Michael Shannon. And if anybody knows where he's at, tell him to give me a call. I haven't seen him in a while. Let's see. I haven't seen him in a long time, 40 years, I guess. So is it true there's a sign that says nuh'un Gumshi, which means Noah's Ark? Is that correct?
That is true. In fact, that sign is still there. They replaced it, but it says in Turkish it says nuh'un Gimisi. Nuh'un being Noah's, and Gimisi means boat. So Noah's big boat, or Noah's Ark
Okay.
in English.
Well, the Bible says in Genesis 8 that the ark rested in the seventh month upon the mountains, plural, of Ararat. And there are two mountains there, Greater and Lesser Ararat. We're building a big model of it down here. We got our Noah's Ark, that mountain's done. We just got to get a couple $1 million to build the Noah's Ark, maybe not a few million. So, Andrew, tell us about what your ministry over there and what got you started in all this. And excited to hear this. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I didn't plan on being out over here and doing this full time. But I got interested as a child. I was in middle school. I was 13 or 14 years old, and Ron Wyatt came out to Sacramento, California. I didn't know who he was, but I saw the announcement, and it was a one night meeting. And he claimed he had found Mount Sinai, the Red Sea crossing, Noah's Ark. And I was kind of a geek back then, and so I had homework. So I was like, "Dad, can you go to this meeting for me and come back and tell me what the man says?" And my dad came back after the meeting and said, "Well, this man says he's found all these sites." So I was very excited to learn more. And I was into history back then as a kid. And so I bought his book, Discovered Noah's Ark. It was a very small book. So I thought I had a lot of questions still. And so this is pre internet. And so 1991, 1990, I called 401. I got the operator and I said, "Can you find a Ronald Wyatt in Madison, Tennessee?" Because he had a P.O. box in the front cover of his book. And they sure enough found him. They dialed it through for me, and he picked up. And he said, "Well, I'm just coming back from the Middle East. I just got home right now. Call me tomorrow and I answer all your questions." And so I called him the next day, and we actually talked for about 2 hours. And then I called him the day after that again. And that just started, a long term phone call relationship with Ron, and asking him tons of questions. And I even did the same with people who worked with him, like David Fazold, Dr. Bill Shea, and even critics. I would talk to them, say, "Okay, why don't you believe this man?" and all that. I was really into researching it. And then finally, we invited Ron out to California. I met him twice in 1995 and 1996. And that got me really interested, especially in Noah's Ark, that I came out here with a friend, Bill Fry, back in 1997. My first trip to Turkey, and we saw the sites for about a week out here. And now I live out here. And so it was basically the pandemic happened, and I was over here about to do a tour in Saudi Arabia for the real Mount Sinai. And 3 days before the tour started, they shut the borders down. And so my friend out here said, "Hey, why don't you just live in this area? We don't know how long it'll take for the borders to open. You're more than welcome to stay in the country." And so we got my visa here, and yeah, so now I use this as my base. I'm like 30 minutes from the Ark site.
Well, when I teach on Noah's Ark, my video number 3 about dinosaurs in the Bible in my series, you can get the whole series for $50, 18 hours. I talked what I knew Ron Wyatt also. Met him several times, talked to him many times. Very excited. I've always said, if I disagreed with him on some theological things, okay, but I said if I was God, he's the kind of guy I would let find all that stuff, because he wasn't looking for glory. He was
Mm.
looking to get rich off it. He's looking to glorify God. There's 4 theories people have about what happened to Noah's Ark. One, They took it apart, reused the lumber. It doesn't exist. That's a reasonable theory. 2, it rotted. 3, it's still on the mountain. 4, it's down in the valley. So there is greater Ararat. Is that correct?
Yeah, there it is. I see that every
Mount
day
Ararat.
out my window.
Now, the Bible does not say it landed on Mount Ararat. It said it landed in the mountains of Ararat. And greater Ararat is a volcano. Some people think it's still up there. They point to this thing. I think that's just the edge of an ice sheet. It's not Noah's Ark. And how close do you live to the mountain there?
We're at the base, about 10-minute drive, 15-minute drive, very
Okay.
close.
Well, Ron Wyatt published Life magazine published this article. He said, "Look at that. Is that Noah's Ark? That's the place where you think, and Ron thinks, and I think that is what's left of Noah's Ark, right there." There was Ron Wyatt and David Richard Reeves, a good friend of mine, and they think that's Noah's Ark. They say it collapsed out to the side. They call it splay. When the ship gets older, falls out, gets wider than it was at the beginning. I'm doing the same thing for different reasons. Okay, laying out in the middle. But these are the drawings I believe that Ron made of the ship. So tell us, Andrew, what do you think about all this?
Oh yeah. So on my first trip here, it convinced me. Of course, Ron had his videos, and I went to his meetings twice. But being out here in person and walking on the site, there's no way it can be a natural formation. Critics will try to say that the rock in the middle is what created the shape, and then the mud coming down this mountainside, hit the rock and then formed a boat shape. The problem is, if you look at fluid dynamics, the pointed end would be downhill if this was created naturally. And you see the complete opposite at the site. And some of the critics who have never been here, in fact, they put the photo upside down, thinking that the pointed end, is created because the mud flow is downhill when it's actually uphill. And so you can't use a mud going around a obstruction like a big boulder to say this is how the site was created. I saw one published peer-reviewed article say, "Oh, this was a block of solid rock, limestone that came from above down the mountainside, got stuck where it's at now, and then glaciers over millions of years and weathering created this boat-looking site." And obviously, the guy has not been here who wrote that. He's a geologist, a Turkish geologist. I don't think he's been out the site, because when you walk in the site, it's not a solid block of rock. The scans we've done and other people have done shows that there are internal chambers, there are patterns that have to be man-made, there are right angles and empty corridors. And I'll show you some of the new GPR scans that show that this is not a man-made random pile of dirt and rock. It's actually the remains of Noah's Ark.
Okay, now if I recall, Ron was speaking on this one time. He said he thinks the ark slid down the mountain, who knows when, maybe 100 years ago, maybe 1,000 years ago. But at some point it slid down and it hit a big rock and caved the side of it in a little bit. If you look at the bottom picture here, the green Noah's Ark, it's got a dent in it. He said it slid and got impaled, for lack of a better word, on a big stone. You live there. Is that true? Did it smash into something?
Yeah. I mean, the details, without getting all technical here, the stone is there. It's probably two big boulders. It's in the middle. Now, Ron believed that this stopped the ark where it's at. Otherwise, it would have continued down the mountainside. And it's true. The mountain goes further up, about another 2,000 feet or 1,500 feet. And you're right at the Iranian border. And it was up in that area that Ron was looking for inscriptions and anything that would prove that the ark landed up there. In fact, we went up there a couple years ago and got permission. This is a military zone, so we got permission from the Turks to fly a drone. I had a drone with me, and they said I could fly it along the border to see if I could find anything. And they even let me fly it into Iran. So I was very nervous because I didn't want to cause an international incident. And I had this general watching my screen, make sure I did exactly what he said I could film,
Right.
And but the ark, for sure, it landed higher up and it came down the mountainside. But what it's looking like is that rock in the middle is not part of bedrock right there. It actually came down with the boat. It's part of the rock that you see above the ark site. There's a ridge of rock up there. It's limestone. And you're finding a lot of fossilized coral. I found a fossil snail on the ark, And the ridge over from the Ark to the east, you find sand dollars and shallow water seashells. So you find fossils in this area, and there's no sea over here right now. And so the Ark did come down and get stuck where it's at. So Ron is correct on that. But it's looked like the rock in the middle was not the reason why it got stuck, but because the mud flow is pushing it against that western side of the valley. And if I had a photo, I could show you. But basically, the rock is there. And I think God preserved it right where it needs to be, because the perfect angle for where they put the visitor center and people coming up on that road, you can see the Ark perfectly from where it's at right now, versus if it continued down into the valley below.
Okay, now Ron had and let me hold some of the rivets. His theory was the Ark was actually riveted together with, put a steel rod through the wood where you need to make a joint and put a big washer and beat it, flatten it out like a rivet. Do you see any of those over there? Do you know about that? Or
Yeah, I've seen that one. The one I think he had it at his meeting in California. But when on the site, you see a lot of dirt. You see the boat formation. You see the indentions on the side where it looks like the rib timbers are eroding. And it was along the western edge where Ron did a metal detector scan. He did one over the whole boat, but he was getting a 9-foot reading. Every 9 feet, he was getting a reading with his metal detector, and he believed that these rivets were holding together the timbers. And so, personally, I wish I could find the one he found a really nice one. It'd be nice to have one of those in the visitor center here. But we've seen other look like oxidized rivets, and I can send you a photo later. I don't know if it's on that poster there, but basically it's two rings, and it's on a big, it looks like a rock, but maybe it's petrified wood, and they're oxidized, so there's nothing left but the two rings. I remember showing that photo to Ron because I found it on my 1997 visit, and he really thought that those were oxidized rivets there. And I think someone else had tested it, and they said it was the same ratio of metals that's in Ron's rivet, because Ron had his tested to show that there
okay.
were alloys.
He also mentioned that he thought the Ark was made out of like a giant plywood, 3 layers cross laminate. Is that cut into it? You can see it's plywood, 4 inches thick. Is that? What do you know about that?
Yeah, I've seen that too, but not on the site. I saw Ron's sample that he was able to get. So they dug that out on the 1987 dedication when they started building the visitor center in June 1987. And Ron got permission to do the radar on the Ark as a demonstration for the government officials. And he noticed that there was an object about 2 feet below the surface, about 70 feet from the end of the boat. And this is what they found. And the governor told one of the Turkish soldiers to dig it up. So you can think of it as the official excavation. It's the only time someone's been allowed officially to dig on the boat. And they pulled this up about 2 feet down. So on the surface, again, you're seeing grass and dirt, and you see the outside edges. But from the internal scans we're getting from the GPR, the solid big structure are between 3 feet down all the way down to 7 meters or 20 feet. And so much deeper than what you can see on the surface.
Okay. All right. Now, is Ron's Archaeological Museum still operational up in Tennessee?
I think it is, but I believe they're combining that with David Reeves.
Right.
He has another center. I believe they open it, and I heard that they moved some of that stuff over to the center, which is a much bigger and better building.
Yeah.
I forget the name of it though, and I followed David online. I forget. Sorry.
Now, a couple more thoughts, and I'll let you take it away with all the other sites. Ron believes, and I think he intuitively would be right, that the Ark had a large ballast underneath, rocks, so a lot of big heavy weight under the boat to keep it upright. Stormy weather, you want something heavy on the bottom so it can't flip over. And have you seen anything about that? This ballast up there would have ripped it off.
Yeah, so he found 2 sites, one up near the Iranian border where the Ark originally landed, that he took a sample from that up by the Iranian border, and that sample got Dr. John Baumgartner involved. It was because he gave the sample to Jim Irwin, the astronaut, and Jim passed it on to John Baumgartner, and John had it tested, and he thought it was a satellite had crashed there because it was all these alloys you wouldn't expect to find in the countryside. And so Ron also found some of this heavy rock, which he believed was ballast, coming out at the lower end of the boat, where the boat had fallen apart and crumbled, and so the end was kind of exposed there. And so he, one of his trips there, they found a pretty big piece of it, quite heavy. And we've actually found small pieces that look very similar to the one he had, but we haven't tested it. But it has the same look and feel, with kind of shiny and dark and reddish and very heavy for the size it is. So like high end metals.
Okay. Now, this visitor center I'm showing here, is that still there? Is that what you get to go see all the time?
Yes, yes. In fact, we recently renovated it, and we had a grand opening ceremony in 2022, and we had a bunch of officials there. And so now we have posters in there. We redid all the restrooms, built a little kitchen for the guy who runs it, so he can serve chai and coffee and drinks to people. We have all these big posters set up in the middle of the building now. It used to be just empty. And so now we have these posters that shows and explains the evidence for Noah's Ark to, we get visitors from around the world every day coming there. And so then we have a little media room to the side where they can watch videos about the evidence for Noah's Ark. So that's still running, yeah.
I mentioned in my seminar that it's 300 cubits long, and that's elbow to fingertip, and everybody's is different. Mine's about 21 inches. Standard Egyptian cubit, is that what you say? That as Moses was raised in Egypt, and he edited Genesis together, my theory is maybe he used the Egyptian cubit. I think in terms of feet and inches, because that's where I was raised. Other people think in terms of meters and centimeters. Uh, have you gotten into that? Is that right? 20.6.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, you can even look outside of what Ron says in the Encyclopedia Britannica. It says that the ancient Royal Egyptian cubit during the 18th dynasty, so this time late Bronze Age, the time of the Exodus, that was the standard of measurement, like the metric system is today outside of the U.S. So this was the standard that even the Mesopotamians used, and the Babylonians and others, and it is 20.62 inches about.
Okay.
And we brought this guy from Texas came out and he wanted to check himself. He said, I don't believe what Ron said, or he just wanted to try it. He brought a long tape measure. It was like 300 feet long, so he had to use it twice. But he measured the ark. We filmed it, and we actually put up his raw video on our YouTube channel. But it's exactly still 515 feet long, which is 300 Royal Egyptian cubits. So
now Ron said that he found these big rocks. He thinks they were anchor stones or drogue stones, 9,000-pound rocks with holes drilled through the top. Are they still there? Do you know anything about those?
Yeah, in fact, they found a total about 26 of these. Around Ron had said he had found 2 near the ark site in the mud flow, but that mud flow is always changing every year, and so far no one has found those. But the 26 that have been seen are about 15, 20 miles to the northwest from the ark site in a little village called Arzap. And in this village, you'll find these stones, and that large one that you see Ron standing beside and most people take photos of, it's still standing there. And they are heavy stones. The theory is that they are drogue stones, which would not be anchor stones. They would be tied or hanging from the boat to stabilize. They were stabilizing stones. So when you're in a big storm, the boat doesn't capsize, or it helps with the boat not going back and forth as much. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
I mentioned this in a seminar once, and one of the atheists said, don't you know if he had rocks hanging all over the boat, it would slow him down?
Where's he going?
I said, where's he going? He's not trying to go anywhere. Exactly. I think that's logical. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're so stupid. Wouldn't it slow him down? Anyway, brother, you said you had some drone footage. Tell us more about this. Then let's go to all the other stuff. I've been interrupting you too much here.
Oh, no. Well, I can. The first one is the new film that we show at the visitor center. So these films are mainly graphical, because we get people from around the world with different languages. Some of them, they have English or Turkish subtitles. But yeah, I'll just show this. It kind of gives an overview of the site, and then I can show a couple other things, and I'll talk about the new scan results. This is exciting news that hasn't really been published, but I'll show it to you guys. So let me first start with this new video that we show at the visitor center. It is 4.5 minutes long, but we're not going to watch it all. So we'll just get you a taste of it. It's on our YouTube channel too, so you don't have to come out here to see it. Now, it does have music, so to get the full effect, you have to go to the YouTube channel. We don't want to play it here tonight because they're copyrighted licensed music, so we don't want your video to get flagged. But here's the drone video, and we're flying up to the boat formation. This was found in 1959 by Captain Durupinar, a Turkish cartographer working in the Turkish military, and he first noticed it from a high altitude photograph on 9/11. Interesting enough, 1959, September 11th. And then a month later, the first photograph was published in Hayat magazine, which means Life magazine in Turkish. And then that photo hit the worldwide press. That got an American Christian group interested. Here's that's the first photograph right there, September 11, 1959. And he was just mapping out the area because he's very, this area is very close to the Soviet Union at the time. And so NATO wanted to map it out. Here's the very first photograph everyone saw, October 23rd, 1959. They published it and they gave it to the press. In June, the American Turkish expedition went out there. Now, they came away kind of negative, but one guy said it has to be a man-made formation. It can't be natural. And that was published in Life magazine. Here it is. This is the copy that Ron Wyatt saw. He saw this issue and he got interested in the site, but he couldn't get out there until about a decade later, in the late 1970s. Now, R. Guler published some of the first low-altitude photographs. The military hired him. He was a famous famous photographer. There's some other articles that are written about the site in the early 70s, mid-70s, but then what really got things going was Ron Wyatt. He came out there in 1977 with his two sons, and from the 77 until his death, he was instrumental in researching, promoting the site as Noah's Ark, and getting everyone interested, and that's exactly why I got interested, was because of him. And then the Turks later on, they got interested. Here's my first trip. Here I am as in right middle of college. There with Bill Fry in June 1997. Then the first scans were done with ERT in October 2014. I was there with the media crew filming the work. John Larson from New Zealand did that. And then 2019, we had the Science Channel filming us when we did GPR, and I got some new results to show for that. And then the Turks hired their own scientists in 2021, and those results have not been published yet. So why do we think it's Noah's Ark? Well, it's a boat formation in the mountains of Ararat, as you mentioned. And as I just mentioned, it's a boat shape. And it's not natural. There's no way that shape is formed naturally with the pointed in uphill. And you can see there's that boulder in the middle. The different geophysical surveys, these are non-destructive ways to look underground. They show that there's a pattern that has to be man-made. And then here's the rivet that Ron found. Ron also did testing for carbon, and then deep inside the boat, he was able to get a sample that showed us higher carbon than out in the mud flow. And then these are the drogue stones nearby in the village of 8. Yeah, and then it ends with just a boom up video showing it's very beautiful here. So if anyone wants to come out here and see it, this is probably late June, this photograph. Right now it's kind of more brown. But yeah, just come out here. And I'm going to show you one more. Looking through my list here. Let's see. This one is just kind of a beautiful area. So we're talking about drone video. This one will give you another view, and then we'll look at new results, like what's inside this boat formation. So right nearby is this huge fossil site, just across the valley or over a hill. And you can see it has these fossilized sand dollars, seashells. It's all right close to the Ark. This is the village of 8, where the drogue stones are, and some of them sadly are broken up by the villagers, but you do still have some that are well preserved. It's an ancient Armenian cemetery there, so you see all these stones with crosses. And so, but right here, you have some of these anchor stones that were reused by the Armenians as headstones in the cemetery. We're going to look at, let's see, there's one more. This is more of a cinematic, so it's a slower video, but let me speed this up. I'll show you this. There you go. That's the big famous one. And you can get a good view. Actually, you look through it, it points right at the big volcano, Mount Ararat. Now, in 2000, I'm going to show this next video. And I did a presentation earlier this year for our creation group in the Midwest. I'm going to pause it right there. So this is the recording of my presentation, but in it, I showed these slides. So in 2019, October, we had a miracle occur when we got permission to do GPR scans. And they gave us permission at the very last minute. This was September 2019. And they said, okay, you can do it. But I had to fly to Saudi Arabia 3 weeks later to help Joel Richardson film at the real Mount Sinai in the land of Midian, which I think we'll talk about later. But so I had like a 3-week schedule to fundraise $25,000, find a GPR, this geophysical survey crew from the United States, find somebody who could do it that quickly. And it just happened that it all worked out to be done when the Science Channel was going to be in the area, and they had already pre-planned their trip months in advance, and we had helped them get their permit. And so they did a 1-hour show about Noah's Ark, and it all worked out because they can show some action on the web on the Ark site as we're doing this work. And the most interesting thing that came out of it, after they got the results back and the archaeologists in America looked at it, again, these are people who are not associated with Ron Wyatt or even some of them were not even Christians. They were just experts hired to do a job. And then the guy who interpreted the results, he's an expert in GPR, which is radar, and he trains archaeologists, and he's based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And he said, after looking at for example, the 100 megahertz antenna, so GPR, ground penetrating radar that shoots this electromagnetic signal thousands of times a second into the ground, and like sonar on a submarine, the signals bounces back, and then it's collected by the computer system, and then you can analyze the results later on your laptop. And so this guy was analyzing the results of the data collected, and he saw this pattern below the surface of right angles. Right, and this is the downhill western side of the boat. And he said, so it's about 21 feet down, 7 meters. And this archaeologist who had nothing to do with us, but we hired him to look at the results, he said, this is where I would excavate if I was going to excavate. He said, this usually is not found in nature. You have these right angles here that suggest man-made structure. And so that was very exciting. We didn't know what we would get. We just hired these people, paid a lot of money, and hopefully we got something good. And sure enough, it was showing man-made structures below the ground. Well, so that was 2019, and it was showed 2020 on the Science Channel, which is owned by Discovery. And then I think now all over cable they show this episode. Well, later we were talking to a Turkish scientist, and he said, well, why don't we have a second person analyze the results? And so he knew of a scientist who had 40 years experience. This lady works in Connecticut, I believe. She has her own business. She's a geophysicist. And so we gave her all the raw data. And we didn't say anything about what the other guy said or anything. We just said, here, what do you think of this site? And so she analyzed it last November, 2023. And let me just kind of fast forward on this video. This is brand new. So this is, again, the right angles you're seeing up in the upper, kind of the yellow and red. Those are the high resistive areas that suggest man-made walls or something that the radar signal is bouncing off. That's not mud. So that's okay. So we're gonna go past all this. So I'm gonna get to the good stuff. This was my presentation. Okay. So the other thing we found on that trip that was shown on the Science Channel, linear patterns about 8 to 9 feet down. You can see those lines. And in fact, we were filming it live. The guy had his iPhone out while the GPR guy was running the survey. He's like, hey, look at this. And so he was able to capture the moment they actually saw this 8 to 9 feet down, these linear patterns that suggest, man-made and not natural formations below the ground there. Okay, so what I'm going to show you here, this is what this lady who had 40 years experience, who took our raw data from, what was that, 4 years ago. And so she looked at it and she said, did you guys tunnel in this site? Is there a utility tunnel here? I was like, no, it's a middle of, a mud flow. It's a field, it's way out in the middle of this hillside. There are fields all around it, but no one has dug, a utility line through it. I asked her why, and she did a Zoom call with me, and she explained. She said, well, and this one is this scan here shows 5.4 to 6.5 meters down. But she said she has found a tunnel. You're looking at the GPR results that a small person, it's not all the way filled in. So she said it's an open air void. And that's that red line you see going down the middle of the boat. So the pointed end on this one is on this graphic is down at the bottom. So going from the top end of the boat to where the rock is a preserved tunnel about 5 to 6 meters down. But it's if you go through all the slices of the data, this tunnel is tall enough that she said a small person or somebody could hunch over and walk through this still. And what's really interesting, there's a partly preserved one just to, you see the yellow arrows pointing just to the left. So maybe the ark had, I think even Ron's design, he had a little differently, but you're looking at just kind of like the Answers to Genesis, Ark Encounter, Ark, where you have these hallways, a central hallway down the middle, and maybe one on each side by the hall. And if you think of it was symmetry, like the ark was the same on both sides. So what we're seeing today is that there's still open tunnels that have not filled in with mud down inside the boat. And then what do they lead to? And this is interesting because from there, it leads to a central void. There's a central atrium, you could call it. And it's really crazy because I went to the Ark Encounter site in Kentucky in 2018, and they actually have their model for the ark. They have a central kind of opening that would go through all the 3 decks of the ark and let in light and let the air circulate. And maybe that's how they got supplies up and down. And there is a central void that's quite deep or quite high going below this rock where the rock is. And that's going down into the boat formation. That's where the hallway leads to. So she calls it like a cave or something, but if it's halfway full of mud, you would expect something like that. But that central hallway goes right to it. And so she wants to do a scientific paper about this. And hopefully I didn't ruin that by pre-publishing these results, but I don't think it will matter. But anyways, we were so excited about these new scans and what they're doing now with the data. They're trying to make a 3D model where we can turn it around and look at it and see this hallway, which looks to be on the second deck, going to this central atrium in the middle of the boat that is open through all the decks. And so, people ask, has anyone been inside this formation? And they confuse, they see videos on YouTube of people inside a glacier with wood. And, there's the Chinese group that got hoodwinked, I think, by people putting ancient wood on old wood up on the mountain. And so in 2009 and 2010, it was all in the news that they found the Ark of Mount Ararat. And nothing has happened with that. And the rumor is from all the locals here where I live, they said one of the guides planted the wood up there. And then he made about $1 million, I heard, off the Chinese businessmen. And no one's been inside the Druppener site. No one. The Turks have not let us dig yet, or they have not dug themselves. But they do want to start doing more work. So in 2021, I'll just briefly mention this because we don't have. I'll just play this video here, but we don't have the results yet for this. But a couple of years ago, the Turks hired their own scientists because of all of our publicity, the newspaper articles about the GPR scans and the ERT scans before. They got the Turks interested to finally look at the site again. And so these are Turkish scientists right there. I have a drone flying over them, and they did GPR and ERT. In fact, they did probably the most extensive ERT, which uses electrical signal or electrical, I guess you call it signal. They shoot the electricity through the ground, and then based on the conductivity of what's below the surface, whether it's a void or a mud flow or something, they can map it out on software. And the Turks did the best scan ever of that, even more than what John Larson did in 2014. And I think that was it for that video. And I got one more Noah's Ark video. And then if you have any questions or want to, let's see, this was, I think it's the same central hallway. That's the same, sorry. Sorry, guys, 3 a.m. here. And that was, let me show you some drone video. What Ron believed was Noah's house, where he had found the grave markers. And you hear about Ron Wyatt stuff. One of the stories he talks about is this site here, which is right by the village, which has the anchor stones. And they had found this ancient house with 2 grave markers in the front. and on the grave markers were you can see this in Ron's films, but these grave markers had 8 figures on it, and the 2 tallest figures in one grave marker, the lady had her eyes closed like she had passed away first, and then the second headstone, both the man and the woman, the tallest figures drawn or carved on this rock, both eyes were closed on both figures, so like he had died last. And above it was this wave, and then there was a boat on the crescent of the wave, and above that was a rainbow. And so Ron believed, based on just this pictograph, this like a hieroglyph, that this was actually the grave markers from Mr. and Mrs. Noah, so Noah and his wife. And he shared this theory with a bunch of ark hunters. And sadly, in 1984, I believe it was, or early 85, the site was robbed. And when the police got involved, they found out from a local villager who was paid about $300 or $400 to help this ark explorer dig up the grave. And he told the police, after they tortured him, Ron said they pulled out the guy's fingernails to get him to talk. And he said, well, what we found was this big 18-foot long sarcophagus, a stone box. And when they opened it up, there was a giant skeleton inside and all this gold. And so it's right above where it says the word house. You kind of go 11 o'clock over, right in that area in front of this ruined house. You see on the screen here was the grave itself, and the depression used to be there still. But 2 years ago, the Turks came in and they excavated this whole site. And what they found out was that this is actually an Armenian chapel, and these 2 headstones were in front of it, these ancient headstones. So we don't know whether the Armenian, the Christians, built this chapel in honor of Noah or not. But now when you come to this site, it's all been leveled out, but they've excavated down where the house Ron thought was Noah's house. And it's actually a chapel, and it went down 3 or 4 feet. So you got more foundation. And so we were just there today, actually, with the tour group, showing them this site. And so this is, again, the village of 8, which is about 20 miles from the Ark site that has the anchor stones. And I think that was my last for the Noah's Ark videos.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Brother. Okay, if people want to come over and see this firsthand, you do tours over there. You got your websites up, Discovered Media? No, is that what's it?
Noah's Ark Scans.com is our Noah's Ark research and tour website. Noah's Ark Scans.com.
Now then you've got Discovered Sinai. You want to tell us about? I know it's 3 a.m. over there for you. You want to tell us about crossing the Red Sea? Ron found that spot, I believe, and the real Mount Sinai. You have time to go through some of that?
Yes, I do, and that's actually one of my favorite topics. I love studying logistics and just the movement of ancient armies. So I have all these books on this topic, and what it shows is that the Israelites could not have crossed those little lakes by the eastern side of ancient Egypt. You see in the back of your Bible, or you see television shows. A lot of the scholars today believe, sadly, that the Red Sea crossing was right by Egypt in one of these lakes. There's 3 or 4 different lakes, and that you have a map right there that shows it circled in red. And that's the main popular theory. That's the traditional crossing. Ron believed, because of the number of people involved, and using Josephus, which Josephus talks about mountains around the Red Sea crossing. And there's no mountains. I've been there many times with our tours and on my own researching. There are 0 mountains where the traditional Red Sea crossing is. It's just desert, flat, sandy, marshy area. But when he looked at a map, and when you have a map there with his Exodus route going across the traditional Sinai Peninsula, what you have circled in red that's blinking, that's the beach of Nueva. It's a huge, massive beach that has thousands of acres. And there's Wadi Watir. That's the dry riverbed, this valley, the only way onto this beach off of the trade route between Egypt and Midian. And so Ron's belief was that as the Israelites were fleeing Egypt and they're crossing the land of basically the wilderness of the Red Sea crossing, what we call the modern day Sinai Peninsula, they're following the trade route, the route that Moses, when he fled 40 years earlier, when he went to Jethro, who lives in Midian. And all archaeologists agree that Midian is in northwest Saudi Arabia. There's some people try to push and say, oh, well, part of it was in the Sinai Peninsula, but there's no archaeological evidence. All the archaeology shows that Midian was in Arabia. And that's where Moses fled to, and he married his wife, she was a Midianite. And so when God said, bring the Israelites back to this mountain, the mountain was near Midian or in Midian. And so they were following that same route that Moses took. And then God tells them to make an example out of Pharaoh to change direction. And you find that in the Exodus 13 and 14 and 15, the whole story of the Exodus. And where they change direction, there's one dry riverbed, this one access point that they followed, and it leads to this beach called Nueva today. Now you can go there today, and there's a bunch of resorts there. You scuba dive, but it's a huge beach area that would fit the Egyptian army and the 1 to 2 million Israelites, or how many you think there would be. And so they were stuck there. The Israelites could not go anywhere. The sea was in front of them. They're surrounded by these big mountains that Josephus, ancient Jewish historian who lived right after the time of Christ, he said these mountains surrounded them. And coming on the rear was the Egyptian army, 600 chariots plus all the host of Egypt, it says in the Bible. So a big army was coming after the escaping slaves, and they're stuck here. So the only way to go forward was into the water. And if you look at the bathymetric chart, the underwater maps, the topography for the Gulf of Aqaba, this is the only place underwater that people could walk. It is deep. So some people thought it was only 300 feet deep. It's actually 850 meters. So it's a couple thousand feet deep. But, the Bible in Isaiah talks about how God made a path to them for the Israelites through the deep sea. And they were, this deep water. It mentions deep a bunch of times in Exodus. So it was a deep area, but it's much deeper on both, especially the south side and on the north side too. So it was a natural, I call it a walkable path, because it's a gradient that you can come down, walk with your sheep and cattle and children and women. Everyone could walk it, and then the chariots of Egypt could follow through. There's no underwater sea cliff here, unlike the rest of the Gulf of Aqaba, where you would have to rappel if the water was removed. This is natural roadway, like the Bible says, and it leads up unto the land of Saudi Arabia, the land of Midian. And that's exactly where Ron, when he flew, he hired an airplane out of Eilat. At the time he was researching this, Israel had control of the Sinai Peninsula. This is the late 70s. And he hired an airplane to do his survey work, which is kind of cool. And he saw this beach. This is before Google Earth, so he had to do this type of work the hard way. And so he hired their plane. He saw this, so him and his sons went down there and drove to the Nueva Beach, and they started scuba diving. And they believed that they had found chariot parts out there, different chariot wheels and hubs, and so that got him interested. Because of that, exactly. There's some of the photos that they took. And so because if this is the Red Sea crossing, that means Mount Sinai is not at the traditional Mount Sinai. And so Ron looked in Saudi Arabia for. Now, back then, Saudi has been a closed country up until 2019. You could not enter Saudi Arabia. You had to, as a tourist, you could only go in on a business visa if a Saudi company invited you, or if you had a family there, or you're a Muslim going on a Hajj to Mecca. Otherwise, you couldn't come in. And so because of a bunch of miracles, and I'm rushing through this, but I can talk about it in the future more. But anyways, the story is we got business visas from a Saudi prince, my friends and I, through another friend from France. And this Saudi prince gave us 10-year business visas, or 5-year business visas. And we were able to enter using those in April 2016. And because of that, we were able to come and go as often. These were multi-entry. You could stay up to 6 months total in a 1-year time period over 5 years. And so I abused that visa. I used it so many times, and I got as much footage. Who knows when it would shut down? And so we brought the first drones in, and we flew the first drone on top of Mount Sinai, across the Split Rock, and documented all these sites of the Exodus that Ron, we saw in the past. Jim and Penny Caldwell's photographs, some were blurry. They were old, DSLR cameras, 35 millimeter. But now we have 4K drone video of all these sites. And now you can go yourself. You don't have to go on a tour, but we do tours ourselves, and other companies do. But starting in September 2019, the Saudi government opened up Saudi Arabia to tourism. So you go to their website, log in, pay about $150, get the electronic visa, and then show up. And then from there, if you need help, we can tell you how to get to these sites. You rent a car, an SUV, a 4x4. And now they're even paving the roads out there because of the big NEOM construction they're doing, this new high-tech city they're building out there. But they're building all these, putting in these paved roads that One goes right beside the split rock, so you don't have to get stuck in the sand like we did on a couple times. You just take this paved road right to where the split rock is. And so that's all new stuff coming in the last couple of years. They've been putting in these roads. And I'm going to show you a couple video clips of what it's like from the air. Most of these are drone video of these sites that, Ron first went there finally in 1984. He snuck in, but then he got caught because a friend called in the Saudis and said that he was a spy for Israel. And so that got him in jail for almost 3 months. And then he went back legally 1 year later with David Fazold. He got invited by a local from Tabuk, the province capital there. And he got in and he was able to see the sites. But then again, they confiscated all his film, so he had nothing to show people, just a story. It wasn't until later that he got the pictures and videos from Jim and Penny Caldwell, who were Americans working in the oil industry in the 1990s. But now anyone can go, and we'll show you some of this footage we first captured over the last, since 2016. So the first one is, should I have this ready? Here we go. Nope, not that one. That was with Pastor Jim. Yes, this one. So it's a 2.5 minute or almost 3 minute long. This is our very first video we made when we got there. We made a second trip in September 2016, and we brought in the DJI inspired drone, which is the size of a lawnmower. And now we had no permission to bring a drone in, but we knew we had to get aerial video. And you can see it flying along these different wadis. These are the pathways the Israelites took from the Red Sea. This is right beside the Red Sea crossing at sunset. And so how do we get this in without getting caught? Well, we used the letter the prince wrote us. He wrote a letter in Arabic with our passport and the names. And it was signed. It had the royal seal of the Saudi royal family. And we showed that to the customs official at the land border with Jordan. And they let us through. They didn't search our luggage like they do with everyone else. They said, you're finished. Halas, go through, which in Arabic means finish. And so we brought in this huge drone in September 2016, and we were able to fly it for 3 or 4 days out there until we crashed it. It overheated. Tell me this scene with the camels. So this is all the beautiful land of Midian. So some of it is desert, other is lush oasis. And then you have the archaeological sites where Jethro lived. And you see all this when you travel there yourself, or you go on one of the tours. When you go on one of the tours. And this is our second trip in. So you see there's a lot of camels out there, and none of them are wild. They're owned by Bedouins, but we fell in love taking video of the camels. And so this looks, if you've been to Jordan near Petra, Wadi Rum, this is the exact same geological formation. It extends south into Saudi Arabia, and it's much bigger and better, I think. No offense to Wadi Rum, but there's like less tourists, and it's a huge area in Saudi Arabia. Now, this is the plain where the Israelites encamped, that huge area, unlike the traditional Mount Sinai, which has hardly any area for 1 to 2 million people. Now, near the base, you'll find these rock petroglyphs and a lot of the cow figures. And the Saudi archaeologists told Ron in 1985 that these were Egyptian style. These are the descendants of Jethro's sheep that Moses took care of for 40 years. You see, still today, the Bedouins have sheep and goats out there. And there's the blackened peak of Jebel Makla in the Jebel Allah's range. That's the peak. We even climbed to the top. I've been up to the top almost 10 times now. I've been on the mountain 25 times now. And at the base is what we believe is the animal corral and altar of Moses with these white marble pillars right beside it. Now, here's the view from the top. This is from our very first trip in April 2016, that view, looking around. I'm going to show you some more. This is, our old video collection. So the next one I'm going to show you is about the Red Sea crossing. So we kind of jumped ahead, but this is a video we have on our channel that explains what I was talking about the Exodus route, how they start from Egypt. And it doesn't. So the Red Sea crossing is not near that border. So when they leave Sukkot, they actually cross the Sinai Peninsula via the road or the way of the wilderness. Then God tells them when they're camping at Etham to change direction. And the only way you can change direction and end up at the Red Sea is you go to the Gulf of Aqaba at Nuweiba. And there's Nuweiba with the mountains surrounding it, the big beach, and the one way in, Wadi Watir, the valley there. And that's what the Israelites followed. And then later the Egyptian army followed them too. And when you get there, you're stuck on the beach. And these are, the only access to the beach is this valley, valley system. And here we are driving in Wadi Watir. There's the verse from Exodus 14:3. So Pharaoh, when he realized that they're in this system, he's like, they're easy to get to catch them because they're caught in this narrow area. And as Josephus even mentions that it was a narrow place that they were caught in. And again, the traditional sites don't match this. This is the perfect site for the event of the Red Sea crossing is Nuweiba, Egypt. Now, in the distance, I don't know if you saw it there, but there is the Gulf of Aqaba, the Red Sea, and then way across there's the land of Sinai. Land of Midian, Saudi Arabia. There's what Josephus said. They were encompassed by mountains, the sea, and their enemies. And he knew what he was talking about. He lived closer, even though he was 1,500 years after the event, about the time of Christ. He lived closer than we did. And I'll take his word over the scholars today. So here's the underwater topography. So this is when you remove the water, that has that gentle slope that people could walk down. And this is some of the footage of some of my friends who are scuba divers from that area, from the Saudi side. And here is Isaiah 51, perfect verse that talks about the depth of the sea, how deep it was there, and that God created a path for them, a road through that sea. So they can get to here. This is the Saudi Arabian side. And again, this side is a huge beach. So the 1 to 2 million Israelites could come up here, and this is where they saw the bodies of the Egyptians on the beach there, and also where they marry them, and they had the big party and the dancing and celebration that God saved them. And sorry for the advertisement, but if you want to go to our tours, and then let me show you some more. So we're going to go into the Red Sea. Into the Exodus route. So the next one I'm going to show you is a possible site for the oasis of Elam, where they have the 70 palm trees and 12 wells. Now this site is a canyon site just south of. I love being there. It's so beautiful, red rock around. You have this big oasis. There's 2 or 3 of these in this canyon, and there's still 12 wells there today. Now they're modern, cemented up, but they're preserving probably older wells. And even the Saudis, when we were there in 2018, filming for another group I had set up to guide this guy around, the locals came up to us. We were in Al-Bada, which is where Jethro would have lived, this modern town nearby. And the Saudis said, you got to go to this canyon. This is where Musa and Yahudites came through. That's what they say, Moses and the Israelites. They said Musa came through this canyon. So they still have a tradition of Moses coming through here. It's very lush. In fact, if you come in June, which is very hot, we went there in June one time, and the locals were harvesting the wild dates from these palm trees, and we were able to eat them. Very sweet and very nice. Here's more of our drone video just showing this canyon oasis, middle of nowhere. Now, if you ask, well, was this around during the time of the Exodus? In fact, right on the edges of this canyon, they found Midianite ruins with Midianite pottery. This ancient, they call it burnt ware. This is pottery that was developed and it was made in Northwest Arabia. And so you're finding these pieces in this canyon. So yes, this oasis existed during the time of the Exodus. It's a beautiful site. And now the next one, everyone knows. You've seen video of it and photos. Well, here's some hopefully some awesome drone video of the Split Rock. After they went to Elam, they had a couple more camping sites. If you read the book of Exodus, they camped at the Red Sea. You can go to Numbers 33 has the list of all the camping sites, but Exodus has the main ones. And so if you read the book of Exodus, after Elam, they camp I think 3 or 4 more sites, and they get to Rephidim, where the split rock of Horeb was. And this is where they complain about the lack of water. And then God tells Moses to strike the rock, and the water comes out. And so this is a different rock from Kadesh Barnea, where God told Moses to speak, and then he got banned for hitting the rock from entering Canaan. So this is the rock where he did strike, and where they also fought the battle of the Amalekites. And so I'm going to show that one next. And again, these all have the music and cinematic videos, but it's copyrighted music, so you'll have to watch it online. So for tonight, we don't have any of the music going. But here it is. So the people who found this were Jim and Penny Caldwell. They were Americans who Jim worked in the oil industry in Dammam, Saudi Arabia, which is on the Persian Gulf. And you'll have to hear their story, but it was through miracles that they found out because of a map that Ron had left at the Nuweiba Hotel. And they came a couple days later, and the hotel owner gave them the map to these sites, to Mount Sinai. And so on their return trip, they had a 1 month vacation. They went to Egypt, so they went to Jebel Lawz. They filmed everything they could, and then they called up Ron. Again, I'm skipping a lot of details, but they were able to get a hold of Ron and said, "Hey, we have all the video you need." And so then that started their friendship, and they were able to film and explore these sites for over a decade. And they were the first one to find this site for Rephidim. Ron told them to look on the west side of Jebel Lawz. That's where Rephidim was. So they came here in 1991 or 1992. They were just exploring, trying to find a way across the mountain range to get to the front of the mountain on the east side. And they saw this big split rock. And you can see the raw footage on their YouTube channel. And it shows that day they were filming as they were going along. And so it's pretty cool seeing how they first found it. This is a very special place. When I was there in 2016, this was like the most stunning even though I climbed the mountain and went to the cave of Elijah, this is the best place I thought on that 10-day trip we had in 2016. It was just amazing seeing this. We made a 3D model of this using photogrammetry. We took a drone and took hundreds or thousands of photos all the way around it, and then the software made a model on the computer so we can measure it and everything. So it's 70 feet tall from the base, and then it's on a hill itself, so it stands out. Some people say it looks like a hand that's opened up, and just standing on the hill. There it is at sunset. It's quite amazing. And in this area, there's no oasis, no water. It's lower elevation, so you can see why it's hotter on this side of the mountain versus the side they camped on the east side. So we're on the west side here, so it's hotter, no water, and you can see why the Israelites complained when they got to Rephidim. They're like, why are we here? Kind of a turn off the main path to go to where they're going to camp in front of Mount Sinai. But God he was teaching them lessons along the way. And at the base of this, I don't know if this video shows it, but you'll see erosion. Now, some people will say, it's just the wind erosion in the area. But if you had, in Psalms, it says rivers of water coming out of this rock. If you had that much water to feed the flocks of the 1 to 2 million people, to give them drink, the water in the desert, that's a lot of water in a short period of time. So the natural erosion that you experience over thousands of years there for the rocks, that was sped up over maybe a week. We don't know how long they stayed here, but the water came out in volumes and for over a day at least, because 1 day later they're fighting the Amalekites. So they were there a little bit. But yeah, I think this video might show it. No, but the rocks at the base of this, they're worn out and smooth, very suggestive that this volume of water came out of this split rock. It's quite an amazing sight. You have to go. Let's see. I got one more of this because I really like going to the site. I've camped there a number of times. We have a lot of really interesting stories. In fact, we met a Bedouin who said they believe the same thing, that this is the rock that Moses struck. The Israelites were here. If you talk to locals who are from this area, we met a guy from Romania, and he was doing a tour, and he said they had run across a Bedouin, and his name was, I think it was Muhammad, like most people over there's name. And the guy, though, was born at the base of this rock. They had a Bedouin tent, they moved around, but he was born one night at the base of this rock. And so his name is, you can call me like Andrew from Turkey or Andrew from Sacramento, California, and my friends will know who you're talking about. Well, this guy, his name was Muhammad from the rock. And people, you're like, what's rock? Look at all these rocks around there. Well, the locals know that means this rock because it's a huge rock sticking out. It's like unique and special. And so when you say, you know Muhammad from the rock? Oh, yeah, that guy. Because he was born there. Now, if you read the book of Exodus, God tells Moses, stand, he says, strike. He said, I will stand by the rock of Horeb, or he told Moses to get up there and then strike the rock. The definite article is there in the Hebrew language. And so it's not just any old rock. There was a special rock that Moses was told to strike. And when you see it, it makes perfect sense. And even today, they still use that term for people who are from this area. Like that guy was born there. Yeah, here's this.
Well, brother, one more thought.
Video.
Do you have any stuff around the pillars that they found to show where they crossed the Red Sea? Have you been down to see those?
Okay, so I don't have a video because The only pillar that's still there, as you probably know, is the one in Nueva, the which is the Egyptian side. And in Egypt, you're not allowed to fly drones. So I have not yet snuck a drone into Egypt. um, so I have photos from the ground, just taking pictures of it. Now people always ask, well, what about the other one? Because Ron said there were two pillars, one in Saudi Arabia, and then one in Egypt. So the Egyptian one is still there. The Saudi one, he told Jim and Penny about his story because 1984, when he was captured and jailed by the Saudis, they took him by helicopter down to that beach where we flew the drone over. And when they landed there to verify Ron's story, they found a pillar still standing. And so that pillar, he told Jim and Penny Caldwell, go to the beach since they were looking around investigating things in the 90s. Sadly, when they got to that area, there was no pillar anymore. It was just a metal flag, like a survey marker set in cement with a metal medallion. It was a survey that the Saudis did, and they set it up where the pillar stood. So what happened to that pillar? Because that pillar is really important because Ron said there were ancient Hebrew on it. It had Solomon's name. It mentioned Moses and the death of Pharaoh. It mentioned the land of Edom, actually, and Egypt. So all these key words were on it. And so we could find that pillar again. That would prove that Solomon believed that this was the Red Sea crossing. So we've been walking around, talking to people all through that area, all these years since 2016. Now, in 2018, we met an older gentleman in Hackle. This is the town near the Jordanian border that Ron was jailed in. It's a Saudi Arabian border town. And we talked to the locals, like, do you guys know of a pillar that looked like this one in Nueva that you've seen here? And an older guy said, I know, I've seen that pillar. We said, where did you see it? So I'll show you where I saw it on the beach. And so we didn't tell him anywhere like so right now that metal flag that the Caldwells found that marked the spot, it's gone. It had fallen over and the pieces are all gone now. So on our first trip there was only pieces on the ground, but even now it's all gone because the weathering and flash floods coming through there. So there's nothing there. So we didn't tell the guy the spot. We had it marked, but he got in the car. We drove him down the beach. And then he said, turn off the road right here. It's a paved road now there. So we turn off. We're going along this rocky road about 100 feet off the beach. And he said, stop here. And he was in the front seat. He pointed. He said, this is where this pillar stood that he saw. And that's exactly where Jim and Penny had marked it, where Ron told them to go to. And that's where they found that metal flag that the Saudis later put up. And so this guy, obviously, we didn't tell him where to stop or say anything. In fact, he was so nervous being there that he told us, okay, let's go. We were only there a couple minutes. He kept on looking around. He didn't want to get caught being with us there at that spot. So he told us. So we asked him, where is it? He said the Saudis dug a big hole right there and dumped it in, like just covered it up. That's how they got rid of it. Now, the Saudis, Ron heard from his contacts that they had took it on a truck and moved it to Hackle, that it was in a warehouse in Hackle. So there's different stories where it's at, but hopefully it's still preserved somewhere, and then God will bring it out someday.
Amen. All right, brother. It's 4 a.m. over there for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been rattling off everything. Hopefully it all made sense at 4 a.m.
This is awesome, brother. I hope a lot of people come over there. I don't know what it would cost to fly over and back. What airport would they fly into to get to you?
If they're going to the Noah's Ark tours, they fly to Istanbul. So usually Turkish Airlines, the fastest, and a lot of direct flights. And then from there, you take a short 2-hour domestic flight to out here. But we explain exactly which airport to fly to get to Noah's Ark. The airport's about an hour away. To go on the Sinai tours in Saudi Arabia, there's many ways to get there. You can go across the Jordan border of the land, so you can fly to Amman. You can the main way people go though is through Jeddah, the gateway to Mecca. You can also fly to Riyadh, but Jeddah usually has a lot of flights between the East Coast. And so you get from there, you take a domestic flight to Tabuk. That's the capital of this province. And that's where Mount Sinai is about 2 hours from the airport. So,
okay. Well, praise God. Put up your contact information again there, brother. Joe, if you can do that. Discovered, past tense, discoveredsinai.com and noahsarkscans.com.
Yeah, and you can find us on YouTube, Discovered Media, kind of my little organization that has all the media for this. But the links on those websites too. You can get to the YouTube channel that has all these videos we showed tonight.
Well, 2 Peter chapter 3, it says at the end of time, in the last days, there's going to be scoffers who are willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment. I think there's overwhelming evidence there was a flood and there was an ark and a bunch of people were 8 people and a bunch of animals were saved in that boat. And here we are 4,500 years later, still have the evidence right in front. But there are some skeptics who will they refuse to believe. It wouldn't matter if God himself came down and told them. They don't want to believe. So God gives up on them. Romans chapter 1. Thank you, Andrew, so much. If you get back to the States, come visit Alabama and see our
I
dinosaur.
will. Yeah, Sergio has already invited me, so I'll definitely
Okay.
see you guys.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, brother. All right. Get some sleep. Well, folks, thank you for listening. Sorry it's been a long time, but I think this is worth doing. Noah's Ark has been found, the Red Sea crossing site, the Mount Sinai. See, it's very simple, very simple. The Bible is true. It's true from cover to cover. It's true about what's going to happen to you when you die. If you don't know if you're going to heaven, you really ought to give your heart to the Lord and get saved, like right now. 55 years ago, someone asked me if I was going to heaven. I said, I don't know. They showed me from the Bible that Jesus died for me and rose from the dead. Said, would you like to receive Christ right now? I said, yeah, but I don't know how to pray very good. And they said, well, there's no magic prayer, but if you'd like the Lord to come in your heart and save you, follow after me. So they prayed a simple prayer and I repeated. You can do that right now. Make today your birthday into God's family. Here's what I said 55 years ago when it worked. I said, dear Jesus, I'm a sinner. I've broken your laws and I'm guilty. But I believe you died for me. I believe you rose from the dead. Would you please forgive me? Would you please come live in my heart and save me right now? Amen. And it's kind of like planting a seed. The seed knows how to make the plant, not the dirt. Dirt knows nothing. Dirt's stupid. But the seed can't do its job if the dirt won't let it come in. I let Jesus come in. He's been growing inside 55 years now. Still got a few areas he's working on. I won't tell you what they all are. It's none of your business. But he's growing. He wants to come inside of you. Ask him. Okay, any questions or comments? Probably. Jabal something, the Mount Sinai, burnt mountain. Well, that's what he was showing there. The top of the mountain is still black. Um, it was on fire, according to Exodus. Okay. Call Joe over there, Andrew Jones. Let's see. Saw the Science Channel expose on the Ark. Were they doing excavation? I don't know. Have they done that? I don't think they're allowed to dig over there is the problem. The Turkish government wants to do it. Hope they do. Are the Drogue stones pre-flood rocks? Is there any studies being done right now to see what the difference of today's atmosphere? Interesting question. I don't know the answer to that one. If you contact Andrew, maybe he knows something. There's a village. They're over there, 26 of them. The village of 8. Let me get back here to my Noah's Ark stuff. Oh, this is all. It's the wrong presentation. Never mind. That was in. Already shut it down. Yeah. Huh? Had to be pre-flood. Yeah. That's it. Thank you so much. Come visit Dinosaur Adventureland. Is today Friday? I get to rest my voice tomorrow. Good luck on that. Yeah. All right. See you tomorrow.